Just above the nasal cavity is the olfactory bulb. If you have cognitive impairments, if you have Alzheimer's, even Parkinson's have been linked in some way. Researchers have found actually dysfunction or some impairments in the olfactory bulb. If you have, say, early Alzheimer's, your smell is impaired, probably on the left side. And the olfactory bulb has a direct projection to the hippocampal area. So when we affect that area, we are likely to also affect the memory processing area of your brain. Then it gets connected to the rest of your brain. So I think personally, directing light, actually, by the way, the nose is really an easy way to do it. The nose is a very easy way to reach not just the circulatory system from the rich bed of capillaries in that area, but it is also close to the brain.
Welcome back to another show brought to you by our friends over at Health IQ, the life insurance company that rewards health-promoting behavior. So as you know by now, if you have dependents, you need life insurance, friends, because if the unexpected happens to you, your family would be in trouble. Now, most life insurance companies, they don't care if you eat healthy. They don't care if you manage your stress. They don't care if you exercise. They don't care how much you sleep or how much you prioritize circadian biology. They just care that you don't have overt disease. So the absence of disease does not equate health, and Health IQ gets it. They understand that just because you don't have disease, that doesn't mean you're necessarily healthy. So as truly healthy people like you probably are because you listen to this channel, you can save, and you should be able to save money on your life insurance premiums, and that's what Health IQ can help you do. So if you have dependents and you're proactive about your health, you can get a free quote to see if you can save on your life insurance by going to healthiq.com/HIH. Again, to get a free quote to see if you can save a little bit on your life insurance, please go to healthiq.com/HIH.
With the device, are you using it frequently, Lew, or?
I use it every day. Yeah. I put a collection of devices on my bedside table. So I decide, okay, what am I going to use tonight?
Yeah.
So the only time I use my device is actually when I'm sleeping, about to go to bed, because I usually have a very busy schedule and I don't remember, so I make it a habit to use it when I'm about to go to bed.
Yeah. And you find it maybe helps with sleep and sleep quality and everything like that, or?
Well, it doesn't interfere with my sleep. That's for sure. And I think it does help with the sleep as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. So we were talking a little bit during the demo. You've been doing this kind of work for over close to 30 years now, which is pretty.
I don't know how do you count it. 20.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I'm surprised. Time flies.
Yeah, it really does. When you're
actually fun. In the beginning, this wasn't full time in the beginning. I had other work to do, but it really took off when we were able to produce our first commercializable device, for home use. I emphasize very much on, a system that you can use at home, because otherwise I think it loses a lot of its value. There's a lot of, at that time, low-level laser equipment were being developed, and they were big equipment. You have to generate a laser through, some bigger system using quite a lot of power. And which means you have to go to the clinic to get treated. And for some of the problems we are trying to address, you can't possibly keep going back to the clinic. Sometimes it does a permanent restoration, but very often it doesn't. You have to keep, doing it.
That's nice. Yeah, the home device. Yeah, it's more practical. And the device you can travel with. I know there's a travel case you have for the gamma unit and stuff. So for people that haven't heard of photobiomodulation, it sounds like a big kind of scary word. But anytime we go in the sun, there's some photobiomodulation occurring. Is that right? I mean,
yeah, definitely.
Maybe let's just review kind of some of the science if people don't know how it works within the mitochondria and what it's doing.
Yeah, photobiomodulation is a big word. Photo, light, bio is related to your, the organism, your system. Modulation is to change it, modifying it, restoring your system. So big word. I think it is an accurate, description of what it does. Before that, for many years, it's been known as low-level laser therapy, low-level light therapy, cold laser, soft laser, a bunch of things.
A lot of chiropractors use that, on like soft tissue injuries and joints.
Yeah, that works too.
Mm-hmm.
So like you mentioned, it works on mitochondria, and that is really the foundation of the mechanism. In the early days, when people find that this thing is working, but they couldn't explain why, until some great work done, especially by the Russian scientist Tina Kuru, she was publishing in the 80s, that explained, how it was working on the mitochondria and what kind of proteins that it was synthesizing, and later on people have done more work and identify the kind of gene that was being transcribed. So it became more and more scientific. Evidence has been growing. I think at this stage, the scientific community, in this field, is very comfortable that that we don't have to do much more work to try and explain the mechanism. Mm-hmm. And we are starting to do more and more into clinical studies. So animal studies are still being done, but I think that we are growing in confidence now to do more into human studies. Human studies are always more difficult because you need, you're dealing with safety here on real people. So you need to get approval by the local regulatory authorities. If you're doing it in the research institution, you need the ethics and board approval. You need money, so you need people. Yeah. Recruitment is a huge issue. But I think we're going that direction.
That's awesome.
Because until we do that, our scientific peers are going to be skeptical. Mm-hmm. Here you're talking about, sometimes, the claims are pretty big. And what light working, we don't know, right? So drugs have been established. You're into nutrition. I think that's a lot more acceptable. You're not introducing anything fancy into the body. So as we progress and show what light does, I think there's going to be, it'll be more fun for me, more fun for people.
Totally.
But, we have to do a lot of work to break down barriers.
And make sure it's safe and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. What are some of the big, obviously you focus on the brain and cognitive states and affecting, dementia, Parkinson's, things like that. But what are just in the canvas or under the canvas of photobiomodulation? There's hormone issues, soft tissue, musculoskeletal stuff. I mean, where are some of the best evidence in terms of how it affects the entire body? And then maybe let's weave our way to the brain after that. But for people listening right now, if they're interested in maybe getting into light therapy, what excites you?
I think like I mentioned, if you can deliver light in the red and near infrared spectrum, because the mitochondria respond to that. So deliver light of just enough energy to the mitochondria. The mitochondria will act in a way that will help the body to restore normal. So the mitochondria, when it's not functioning at optimal state, will respond to this spectrum of light. And I believe when it is already in optimum, it doesn't have to respond, and too much of it actually have a negative effect. So when it responds, a particular enzyme in the respiratory chain, which is processing the energy, will convert this light energy into certain proteins that will lead to the genes to get the body to recover, healing, encourage the multiplication of cells, mitogenesis, to prevent early apoptosis, which is really early death of cells, and these other many things. So the whole idea, whether you are trying to treat body pain, injury, seems to be pretty well accepted now. Whether you're trying to say get your body system to say, your circulatory system to be better. It's all just mainly is how you now deliver this red and near infrared light into the body. So near infrared goes deeper. Red is, will be treating more at the superficial level, say for skin condition. Then you have blue, which is antimicrobial, actually helps kill bacteria. So near infrared goes deeper. People have been using near infrared at maybe a little bit higher power. Could be lasers to deal with deeper, deeper sources of pain in the body. Mm-hmm. So when we treat the brain, it's a very similar theory. Neurons are cells, so neurons will respond to red and near infrared. And we use near infrared because it travels deeper. And studies have shown that, say we use 810 nanometers, that this works really well with the nervous tissues, brain tissues. So that's why we pick 810 nanometers. And we don't have to pick another wavelength. It's, from the work we've done, it seems to work pretty well. So it's generally same theory, is how you deliver the light and so what you're looking for.
Yeah. That's awesome. Now, before we dive further into the brain, is the near infrared and the red light, is it almost a hormetic response? Like sometimes when we exercise, right, we cause hypoxia, and that causes adaptation within the body. I'm just curious, is it like a mild cellular stress, or is it just that the energy or the wavelength of the light triggers these transcription factors in mitochondrial biogenesis? So it's not a cellular stressor, or is it?
It can be a stressor if you deliver too much energy, too much dose. So photobiomodulation has what we call a biphasic response. You just imagine, in the early days of laser, what people were imagining. Before they discovered the therapeutic property of low-level laser, the high-powered laser were used to remove scars, in industrial applications were actually cutting. Really high power can actually cut metal. Just think about it. So there is this other part of laser which is useful for industrial purposes, and then on the other side, which was a surprise when they discovered it, a professor in Hungary, that was in the 60s, that it was helping to regrow fur in lab mice.
Wow.
So there is this thing, this was a surprise, and because of that, more and more research came about. So there is a sweet spot somewhere where it works. If it's really, really too low, nothing happens. It's too high, you get damaged. So there is a sweet spot somewhere. And then some wavelengths actually don't do much. Say between 700 nanometers to 760 nanometers, it's kind of red, but it doesn't seem to do much. So we're talking about selecting wavelengths that have what we call, in the action spectrum to activate.
Yeah,
it's quite a bit of science and understanding to develop a device.
Interesting. Definitely want to get into the brain, but one thing is key here in Toronto, downtown, there's a lot of Wi-Fi and non-native EMF cell towers. Is that non-native EMF, what wavelength is that, or how does that then affect the mitochondria, maybe in a negative way?
I haven't done too much investigation with EMF, so I know there's quite a bit of EMF pollution around. And the evidence, there are both sides. The arguments on both sides, whether it really affects you, and I can't say for sure, but the energy is different. Here we're talking about light, which is really a pure kind of energy, photons, and that is magnetic waves. Yeah. So I know it does something because you can affect the brain with magnetic waves and electrical signals too. Good or bad is how you control it. I think when it's random and chaotic like that, it may not be a good thing.
Yeah.
But I just don't know enough in that field.
Sure. Yeah, I was just curious. I mean, it's kind of related. You have an engineering background, so I was just curious about that. So let's go into the brain. I think it's curious. You know, you mentioned depression, Parkinson's has mitochondrial dysfunction characteristics, Alzheimer's, dementia. How is the near-infrared and the red light, those wavelengths, affecting this default mode network? And maybe what is that?
So one of the things we do when we develop the neuro devices, we started with intranasal, then we wanted, to have more effect on the brain. You can have the early days, maybe still today, developers have developed helmets. A lot of LEDs put on a head and try to get to affect the brain that way. But with the more LEDs you have, the less able you are to develop a home use device, because now you have the plug to the mains to drive all the LEDs. And when you have a closed helmet, there's a risk of heat buildup. There's no escape. There's for body heat. So they have to put in cooling fans, which demand more power. So now how do we then develop a home use device? And we have to then selectively point at areas, strategic areas of the brain. And here's where the default mode network is like the template network for your brain. Is when you're not performing a task, that the default mode network kicks in. People are still learning about the network. There are literally thousands of papers published on brain networks. But it hasn't, they haven't explained fully how, why it's important, what are the various aspects of it that is important, what you need to emphasize. But there's enough knowledge to know that the health of the default mode network is related to certain brain conditions. So some of the brain conditions correlated with default mode network, the main one for me, is Alzheimer's. For example, there's Parkinson's, chronic pain.
You talked about depression.
The depression is also related. But take Alzheimer's disease, for example. Imaging has been done since mid-2000 on the brain, and found that lesions, Alzheimer's patients have lesions in the areas that are also virtually the same areas as the node of the default mode network. So the nodes or the hubs are kind of like railway stations, railway junctions, where all they're all connected, and this is where most of the activity take place, and most of the power of the brain, and most connectivity. And that also explains why you get impaired cognition, because these key areas are being affected. So in imaging, they found lesions, and a lot of these biomarkers are accumulated in these areas.
Like the amyloid beta plaque within the network?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. They're all over the brain, but a lot of it in these nodes of the default mode network. So we know, and partially explained earlier, is cells respond to red and infrared light if you can deliver at the right power. So when you can deliver one thing, I'm theorizing, is you will start healing the neurons at this place. There are lab studies done that show that neurons that are damaged, say by oxidative stress, if you deliver red and infrared light to these in lab conditions, they start regrowing their axon and the dendrites, the neurites. So on the same theory, I'm hoping that when you direct these to the nodes, you are also, getting the same results. That's one thing. And the other thing is, we also try to reactivate, the whole thing. And we've, what we understand from our EEG work, that it elevates also the power of the higher frequency brainwave that also correlated. The low power are correlated with diseases that are related with cognition, like Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, even stroke patients, brains that suffered concussion, for example. So we're doing that to reverse that. So there are multiple reasons to do that.
Mm-hmm. What is a characteristic EEG pattern that they would describe to having like a dysfunctional default mode network? Would it be like the delta state? Is that lower frequency?
Yeah. So these are not necessarily in a default mode network. When they measure it, it's just the brain in general. So you're talking about let's say attention deficit disorder is correlated with too much power in the slow brainwave. So your brain is somewhat locked in at slow brainwave, and if you don't get this oscillation, this energy oscillation out of this level and get into the higher level, like the gamma, beta, and alpha, you're not able to enjoy that area where the brain is processing information efficiently. Mm-hmm. So you don't have the focus, your reaction time is slower, decision maker is not as good, and that kind of explains these I may say cognitive deficit in some people, even among the dementia patients, where we see very similar kind of brain signatures.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And if we could contrast that with high gamma, high alpha, people that meditate, do yoga, activate it, more proactive stress reduction techniques, is that what we would characterize how that affects the brain in contrasting to ADHD and whatnot?
So it is very interesting. In fact, actually, it's kind of counterintuitive as well. So I talk about gamma being high energy, and maybe energy is not the right word, but high, oscillations, faster processing. But people who meditate, long-term meditators, people who have have accumulated tens of thousands of hours of meditation, have persistent gamma state, as reported in research, and they can get in and out of this gamma state quickly, whereas most people who are new to meditation are not able to do that. Probably not even anywhere near.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. I guess when you're at gamma, you are also more aware of what's going on within yourself and what's going on outside, because gamma, I think, is associated with greater awareness too. Now, so the question asked is what if we help people who are trying to achieve that state by entraining the brain, like helping it to achieve that state. So we have tried on people who have meditated for a long time, and they also do brain research, and they can feel that they get into that state really quickly. So that's really interesting. But a lot of people really just want to get into the alpha state, which is really the meditative state, for most people. I guess, this is an intervention with 10 hertz alpha could get you in that state. If you're sensitive, you can feel it. So we want to do more research in this area. We're looking at non-medical conditions, how we can help, say, athletes, sportsmen to perform better. If you're in a competition where you require quick reaction time, focus, that kind of thing, say in hockey or football, basketball, in competitive situation, maybe that's helpful. So we have devices out there. We're getting reports among hockey players and mixed martial arts fighters, and see how they come. We actually, they find it really useful. But they can also combine with other photobiomodulation modalities like the red, introduce this into your body, prepare your body better for a physical event, and then use it again after to recover more quickly.
Yeah.
So more tests are probably needed, but anyway, there are other photobiomodulation equipment, low-level lasers used by coaches, trainers, Olympic teams, coaches. Quite a lot of this research is done by, for some reason, the Brazilian researchers. They research on rugby players and so on, and find that actually the change is actually quite significant in helping the athletes perform better in the field and recover better.
Wow.
So I think a combination is theoretically going to be really interesting. I think it's I don't know if you can use the word enhancement of performance, but I think it allows your body to reach its potential.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it. So,
especially with all the stressors we have, chemical, environmental, psychological. But I've used the Joovv Light for about a month and a half now, and I've really noticed better recovery, less back pain. Yeah. So I'm excited to get the Neuro, probably the Gamma unit later today and experiment with that. That was a cool that you let me use it. But speaking of athletes, so you mentioned performance and all that. So you have the Alpha and the Gamma. What would best help a athlete with performance?
I think ideally you have both. In the days that you are not competing, I think the Alpha just keep your mind in a good state. Actually, the Alpha is probably better for golfers and shooters where you have to be in a calm state, not not all over the map, right? So whereas the Gamma is more like you're really in intense competition and quick decision making. But I think the Alpha and even the 810 with just intranasal at a lower power is just good for maintenance, brain state and so on. But again, this is theory. We are yet to do the test to prove it. Say an hour before an event, the Gamma could maybe have the brain to be to be able to process information more quickly and make quicker decisions.
Yeah.
Quicker right decisions.
Reaction time.
In the field. Reaction time.
What about for head trauma? What would be the best unit for that?
So head trauma, I usually recommend the Alpha, and here's why. We developed the Alpha first in the 810 pulsing at 10 Hertz based on an animal study done at Harvard, where they find that when they tried different pulse rates with the same wavelength, 810 nanometers with LED on animals. So they tried, I think, no pulse, there's, pulsing at 10, there's 100 and perhaps 200 Hertz. Found that 10 Hertz produced the fastest healing for the brain. So these animals was simulated with traumatic brain injury, it knocked the brain and the mice. So
they have a buggy and they drive into a wall, right?
Something like that. They use a ball and just knock it.
Wow.
And then measure, they use scores to measure the brain stress and see, how they compare. Found that, when they pulse at 10 Hertz, the mice recovered more quickly. So we developed the Alpha 10 Hertz. It so happens that 10 Hertz is also where your brain is functioning in alpha state. And when practitioners neurofeedback usually try to get people, use the alpha state as a template and get people to have their brain trained to be able to restore that state to various brain training techniques and so on. So this is a really fast way of doing it. And I think for this reason, the neurofeedback community is latching on to what we do really quickly now.
Because it can accelerate what they're doing in the clinic with the neurofeedback.
Yeah, hopefully. If you use the EEG equipment, you see when you're trying to do this brain training, it takes many sessions perhaps. This is like, whoa, it's immediate. So it's an eye-opener.
Love that. Let's kind of compare and contrast. So because you mentioned EEG, neurofeedback, and your device, for people that, just for the terminology and the jargon, if you will, so there's like the Muse meditation headband. What's the other device that you like, the EEG one?
So we are testing with emotive.
Emotive, yeah.
Yeah.
So light therapy versus EEG, what are the differences so people kind of understand conceptually?
So you got to understand EEG is actually a measurement of your brain electrical signals, and that's how it can detect brainwave patterns. Where we know how normal, abnormal you're, say, if you're tuning to, say, alpha, whether you're having a normal alpha, for example, and that is really a measurement of the electrical signals of your brain, and sometimes, in fact, now, they apply quantitative which is QEEG, quantitative EEG, to compare with what's normal and see how far you're off from normal, and show in a brain map. So it's really easy to see now. So EEG is really diagnostic. It's a way, it's kind of like scanning the brain.
Kind of checking in to see where things are at.
Yeah, right.
But it's not a treatment per se.
Right. So photobiomodulation is an intervention. It is, you can say, it is treatment, and it is is a way of modulating the brain. So it can modulate brain patterns. And this is what we discover. So for many years, people have been using as a convenient method electrical stimulation, transcranial direct electrical, TDCS, direct current stimulation, or magnetic stimulation, TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, to modulate or affect the brain in some way. So I think there are some advocates to use, say, TDCS to improve performance in various ways, to get the brain, to rehab the brain. TMS, the magnetic stimulation, to also do similar things. The evidence has been actually conflicting. Too much of TDCS, if uncontrolled, it shows that actually it has negative effect. Although there are evidence to show that it can help. So it's a little bit confusing where it stands right now. I guess it depends on the person using it, applying it. TMS is not a home use device, because it is big. It need training. It's got to be, need a lot of power. But I think our early evidence and the work we are doing right now is starting to show that light is actually non-intuitive. It's not shaking or moving anything, but it is changing, brainwave patterns, and we're actually in the process of writing a paper right now on a double-blind study that we did on 20 subjects, the healthy brains, and see the effect when we direct gamma to the brain. So very, very consistently, it elevates, like I said, gamma, beta, alpha, which are high oscillatory states, and downregulate the low oscillation states, which is good, which is what a lot of people want.
Yeah.
So I think when it comes out, it'll be really interesting, see what the response is. But it is just the first step that we are taking to get more understanding. So gamma does this. Although we have the alpha for quite a while, we haven't had a chance to see, what alpha is doing in more detail, just because it's, it takes a lot of time and resources to get any study done.
Yeah.
But we want to learn more. So now we have developed a system where we can vary the frequencies to, anything between from 0 to 200 hertz, 200 cycles per second, and see what happens. I think it'll be really interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to get more into the research. One thing that comes to mind, though, a lot of people are embarking on lately is psychedelics, like low-dose, microdosing LSD, dimethyltryptamine, and ayahuasca, magic mushrooms, as a way to kind of alter, spirituality purposes and things like that. Have you read into that and looked at kind of the brain waves?
Yeah, I had like the gamma. I 1 or 2 reports, including myself, using the gamma for the first time. There was some hallucinatory, effect. So I don't know. I guess I've never taken LSD. Maybe it's something like that, but only transient first time. After that, not again. So I guess our brains are all different. We have some side effects. So that's a reason why I say, I mentioned before, alpha, for most brain conditions, it doesn't have potential side effects like the gamma at higher frequency. So gamma could maybe, we have reports of people, having the brain hyperactive, the very sharp, but the side effect could be you may not be able to sleep well for that particular night the first time. I don't have a problem with sleep, but these are potential because our sensitivities are all different.
Yeah.
But if you have a degenerative brain condition like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, you're not going to be sensitive. So we recommend the gamma for people with these conditions where they're not sensitive, but the gamma will help to get the brain to into a higher functioning level, other than treating the brain conditions.
Gotcha.
So neurologically, the other reason, and that's actually the first reason why I developed the gamma, because at 40 hertz, and this panned out in the research done about a year and a half ago at MIT, that when you pulse at 40 hertz, you actually activate the microglia in the brain, and the function of microglia is actually to engulf or remove these unwanted byproducts in the brain. When when your brain is functioning all the time, there is excitation, excitotoxicity that's developed, and this can lead to the brain immune function kicking in, which is really the amyloid coming in, and if it's not done properly, you start getting beta amyloid, which accumulate as biomarkers, say that leads to Alzheimer's disease. So the gamma does a couple of things with regards to cognition. One of which I believe is that it actually needed when your brain is, say, processing memory, because without that, there's too much excitation going on. So it helps to balance that part. And the other part of it, which kind of enhances the effect, is like I say, it activates that good microglia that helps to remove these byproducts. And microglia is really interesting because for a long time they've associated that with Parkinson's, because it can, in theory, also cause inflammation in the brain. But I think 40 hertz activate a good kind of microglia to remove this unwanted byproducts.
Yeah, that's key. I remember an article in Nature back in 2012 dubbed the microglia the constant pruners. And so they showed, it was a picture of someone pruning a tree, and it was nice, and that's kind of, like you said, housekeeping. So you said you're a good sleeper, but not everyone is, right? So if you're like a bad sleeper, or you had sleep apnea or sleep disordered breathing, or a night shift worker, the gamma might help, because we know the microglia and the lymphatic system is activated at night. Would that be a role for it potentially?
I generally think, there are so many, there are multiple aspects to look at. I said gamma could cause too much excitation for some people. Although it does work on the microglia, but I think the alpha pulsing at 10 hertz is is a more relaxed, get you into a more relaxed state. So that could be helpful with sleep. But when your sleep is affected by a structural problem like sleep apnea, I don't think it's going to help, other than kind of counterbalance it some way, because when you have sleep apnea, it's a blockage that's causing the problem. But people who are not sleeping because of stress, because of chemicals in the brain or anxiety and a bunch of things, perhaps the photobiomodulation at 10 hertz potentially can help.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so you're doing some research, collaborating with folks at Harvard, right? I mean, let's talk about some of the ongoing studies and different neurologic research that's emerging with using your device.
So we are doing actually quite a lot at Boston University. So the professor there, Margaret Nazer, has been really an expert in photobiomodulation applied to the brain. She's been funded to use photobiomodulation for Gulf War illness. It's been going on for a few years. And if people with Gulf War illness in that area, please contact Boston University and Margaret Nazer because they're still recruiting. And they're doing, looking at PTSD, for example. They're looking at traumatic brain injury, and her lab has been doing quite a lot of work in that area because they're funded by the VA for, to look at blast, traumatic brain injury. Also, I think they're looking to cognitive deficits and so on. So there are, so that's quite a lot of work done, but it's always a question of, resources, funding. At Harvard, our collaborator and advisor is Michael Hamblin there, and we bounce ideas and what we can do. There are other universities at UCSF. Professor Linda Chow has been looking at the effect on dementia patients, but she's added imaging to see what happens, fMRI and ALS, to get a better understanding on blood perfusion, the changes. But they're also doing cognitive assessments. It's an ongoing study. I think they're about to finish. Hopefully, I've seen, I think the interim results have been pretty good. So we'll wait and see what gets published. So there are other places looking at ADHD, for example. We are looking at traumatic brain injury for other than from veterans. We're looking at general people with traumatic brain injury. I think one of the problems with recruitment is really hard to recruit. People want to do studies on autism. It's a complicated condition. But at the end of the day, if there are researchers out there in belonging to the research institutions who want to look at certain conditions, brain conditions particularly, and see what the effect are with photobiomodulation, I think we can see what we can do.
That's awesome. Yeah, we have a lot of people that tune into this channel that have children with autism. So
yeah, in fact, Parkinson's is another big one. A couple of universities in Australia are looking to research. In fact, we have some really some good coverage, some media coverage in Australia because people with Parkinson's are responding. They generally they don't even have to use a device. They try to put devices together, put on a head. The theory is similar. It's not as convenient to use with our devices. It seems to work as well for Parkinson's. But we really need, do a clinical study to understand the statistics, how many percent are responding, and what we need to do with the parameters to get the best results. So a lot of work. I think that's another area that's promising.
It's awesome. I'm excited to get my device. So just so I understood, or correct me if I'm wrong, the position of most of the electrodes on the neuro unit are where the default mode network nodes are. Did I hear that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the purpose of the intranasal light, if we can explain kind of how that works and what the...
So one of the nodes of the default mode network is the hippocampus. So that's kind of closer to the bottom of your brain and the older, deeper in, which is responsible for memory. So that's one of the later discovered nodes of the default mode network. But generally speaking, if you can deliver light to the brain, there is quite a lot of indirect signaling going on that eventually gets spread. If the hippocampus is part of the default mode network, it gets connected to the other areas. So it helps, but probably not as effective as putting it all together on the to other nodes and so on. But we've been getting, like I said in the beginning, we only had the intranasal. It has worked. It has even worked on Alzheimer's patients.
Wow.
But we are seeing greater response when we have more of this together.
Mm-hmm.
So it does reach the brain in some way. A lot of it reach, say, just above the nasal cavity is the olfactory bulb. It is, if you have cognitive impairments, if you have Alzheimer's, even Parkinson's have been linked in some way. Researchers have found actually dysfunction or some impairments in the olfactory bulb. If you have, say, early Alzheimer's, your smell is impaired, probably on the left side. So they're related, and the olfactory bulb has a direct projection to the hippocampal area. So when we affect that area, we are likely to also affect the memory processing area of your brain.
Wow.
Then it gets connected to the rest of your brain. So I think personally, the directing light. Actually, by the way, the nose is really an easy way to do it. You can inject, like I said, light into the vein as the Russians did. In fact, people still do it.
Pretty invasive.
Yeah, invasive. It gets systemic. It gets this whole body effect. But really, the nose is really easy way to reach not just the circulatory system from the rich bed of capillaries in that area, but it is also close to the brain. So
yeah, and a key brain center.
Yeah.
I mean, hippocampus, that's our primary memory center, right? I mean, and it's affected by stress and cortisol and everything. So, now does it affect the amygdala too?
Yeah, amygdala is even closer. So the olfactory bulb doesn't have so strong a connection to the amygdala, more to the hippocampus, but it's some energy is going to reach the amygdala as well. So we get people report suddenly they have emotional memory recall. So when we treat PTSD, we have to exercise some care. So when I talk about PTSD research, the timing of when this is used, to me at this stage, pending further research and understanding, is not to use it at a time when you're vulnerable and when you're having an episode.
Yeah, you can release some of that.
So you might release some of the emotional trauma.
Yeah, amazing. So do people report better sense of smell? Is that one of the subjective?
Yeah.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
Wow. I remember reading a paper and I couldn't believe it, and I didn't know the mechanisms that men, I think in their 50s, I have to go look back, archives of neurology, and that the sense of smell was a strong predictor of future cognitive impairment.
Yeah,
and so
it's
very interesting.
There is this simple, a few years ago they were talking about a peanut butter test on a stick and see if one side of your nose is smelling better than the other side. You got to watch it. It could be an early symptom. Yeah.
Wow, crazy. All right, so we have the neuro unit, the alpha, gamma, and then the travel unit. If people want to learn a little bit more about V-Light, I know you have some resources online. Where would you want anyone that's just curious to go next if they want to learn more?
I think learn about photobiomodulation in general. Then you have a good understanding. I know it's a lot of work. That's available on the internet. There's some good review papers, published. You Google Dr. Michael Hamlin's name and brain, you get this bunch of review papers that he's either the main author or co-author. It can get complicated, but look at the outcomes. Then you have some understanding why we're doing this stuff. In fact, some of the review papers talk about us because we can't really say too much without risking making a medical claim. If I make a medical claim, I'll have to get regulatory approval. That's why we're doing the Alzheimer's study that leads to making a medical claim for Alzheimer's. But our devices are at the moment considered low-risk general wellness device. It helps your body in general. It helps the quality of life for people, and it could enhance your mental acuity and so on. So we just go that way, and to be more exact, it gets if you understand the mechanism why we're doing this, you can start understanding what it does for the brain. But you go into Google, I think there are forums. I don't actually go and Google what's being said about us. Maybe there are some bad stuff as well. I don't know. I mean, not everybody responds in the same way. But there are interviews done. There are, actually, I'm surprised that quite a lot of people will go out on YouTube and talk about this as well. So you learn a lot from there. I think you'll learn more from searching on the internet than our website. Our website will tell you what products are available, what are the, what wavelength, what it does in general. Certain products help the body in general. Certain products more on the brain. You get information. There are some published studies that are related to us. You can,
I'll look for those. I'll put them in the show notes below the video and stuff. One thing we didn't talk about is epilepsy. We know that the hippocampus can be kind of a focal center of epilepsy and so forth. Have you had any feedback with that?
Yeah. So epilepsy is interesting. We have people with epilepsy. It could be caused by a variety of things that is happening in your brain. It could be chemical. It could be dysfunctional in some other areas. So if we have to resolve, some parts of your brain, it can help with epilepsy. It is a disposition to seizure. Now, one of the things that you notice among our products, that for those that are visible, using visible red, the 633 and the visible red laser and so on, we don't pulse it because people prone to epilepsy can get triggered into that state by looking at pulse light. So it's a photic what they call response that processes by looking at it. So when you don't pulse it, you have reduced the risk. And when you are inserting into your nose, you don't even see it.
Yeah.
So that helps. So the only light we pulse are those invisible light, like 810 and so on. And if you can see the indicators, they're very, very dim. If you put in your nose, on your head, you're not looking at it. So we have never had a report of people who are prone to seizure getting triggered into a seizure with our devices.
Yeah.
So that is the safety side. But generally speaking, there are some response from
Sure. So the near infrared is pulsed. Is that what I heard you say in the device? Yeah. And the red is just constant. I see. Okay, interesting. All right, let's finish up. Lew, best practices, and maybe what's your vision for the future? So as a father, a lot of people are parents and things like that, and or millennials that want to preserve their brain instead of wait till we're 50 and hope for some new medication to prevent Alzheimer's. What are best practices in terms of use daily? And then would you advise this for kids? Okay,
let's start with the general population, generally adults. Actually, we design our devices mainly for adults. I'll go to the kids later. Sure. Generally, I feel that because the photobiomodulation at the power that we're using is safe, you can use it daily. If you're healthy, you're not going to get worse, but it does, I believe, help because like I say, this tries to get the body to restore its balance, its homeostatic state. When it is in that state, it is healthy and you are preventing the onset of diseases. It may be possible that your immune system is kept at a good state, so you're not prone I don't want to make a claim here, but here's based on, hypothetically, if your immune system is at a good state, then you're less prone to the onset of cancer, for example, diseases, flu, that kind of thing. So your resistance is better, and using it daily has no side effect as far as I know. So that is the red, like using 633 nanometers or 655 in the low level laser. That is not, the laser is not available in the US right now because of regulation, but we are registering our device actually now as we speak, so that it becomes available. So that's red, generally into the nose, into the body, prevention of things that affect your body, and it could be helping with, when I talk about homeostatic state, you're talking about balancing sugar levels, blood pressure, and that kind of stuff too. Then the 810 nanometers intranasal at low power helps with the brain. Even if you're healthy, I guess it keeps you at a healthy state. You can possibly even improve your cognition. If you didn't know that you're functioning below your optimum state. So it's good to use every day. There's no side effect.
Yeah.
So
like 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes? What do you think?
The devices, they shut off automatically. The intranasal only devices shut off automatically after 25 minutes. Your hands are free, so it's meant to be hands-free. Yeah. So you can watch TV or do your other thing. It's not meant to interfere with your daily living. You can use it while you're sleeping, like I do.
And you fall asleep with it? And then...
I fall asleep with it.
And it's in there the whole night? I mean, it turns off, right?
But, I think I've trained myself, when it's off, it beeps.
You kind of just grab it.
Just slide it down, and that's it,
Yeah.
And then the neuro devices, higher power, if you want to use that, you may have better effect. If you're normal, just use it once every 2 days rather than every day, just to avoid the risk of any kind of side effect and too much dose, to the brain. So if you're performing, you can use say the gamma about an hour and a half before the event, whether possibly before you're taking an exam or before you're competing in an athletic event, for example. Now for kids, the problem is, say, even our nasal device is a little bit big for infants and toddlers. I think you've got to be, for a nasal-only device, you've got to be above 5 years old to be able to use it comfortably. But kids don't like this, they're non-compliant anyway. So what parents do is, put them on when they're asleep. The Neurons are really, frankly, they're too big for kids. And they can fit kids only when they're in the teenage years, say years 11 onwards. But we are now looking at developing a smaller headset for kids that are 5 and above, but we can't do it for kids that are too young.
Yeah.
So we're looking at possibly helping kids with learning disabilities, that kind of thing.
Oh, it's much needed. Yeah, so many kids get put on Adderall and Ritalin, and that they have negative plasticity induced and addictions and all that. So Lew Lim, really appreciate you coming on the show. This was a lot of fun. So it's Via Light. I'll put a link in the show notes below. And let's tell everyone, or V Light, what's the back? How did you come up with that name?
So you want a name that's not used by anybody. You can trademark it. It fits really well. V actually is French for life. And light, obviously, it's 2 syllables, easy to remember. Yeah. Some people call it Vi-Light, that's okay. But that's the origin of V-Light. V-Light,
I like it. Cool. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you, taking time out of your day and letting us learn more about your technology. I think it's a game changer, and I'm excited to see more and more people using this. So keep up the great work.
Thank you. Yeah.